So we're back again with another athlete story, and today we are welcoming Mr. Darryl Reynolds onto the show. Darryl, really appreciate you taking the time out and talking with me. I've been doing my research on you, doing a little bit of looking and things like that. I can't wait to hear about your story. But we're gonna start out like we do every single one of these. I want you to introduce yourself to everybody listening, everybody watching. Where are you from? Talk about who you are and what we need to know about you.
My man. First of all, thank you for having me on. My name is Darryl Reynolds. I go by D-Ray. It's a nickname that I picked up in college. They took the last couple letters from my last name and the first one from my first. I was like, I like it. Let's run with it. But yeah, no, that's how a lot of people know me at this point. I played at Villanova from 13 to 17. Did the summer league thing with the Sixers in the summer of 17. And then for 17 going to 18, I went overseas to Poland for a year. And turned out to be the best year of my life so far. I'm pretty sure this one's going to top it, but it was just that year it was very special. It was a lot of figuring out I did in that year. And then I got hurt. 2018, I got hurt. So I tore my knee all up in several places. And it was one of those things like, I think your basketball career is done. So you might want to look at things. And I just jumped into what I went to school for, which is communications. So over these past couple of years, I've been getting my hands on everything from writing to public speaking. I did a TED Talk last year called I Can Move Mountains. I released a book, What If the World Stopped Complaining About Mondays, that was actually based off of the TED Talk. Like the book came first, the TED Talk was second, but that was the order it happened in. I've recently gotten to some light acting. When I say light, I mean like the lightest, I mean like feather light. That was for the movie Hustle. If you watch the huddle at the end, I'm like in the background peeking over Adam Sandler's shoulder. But
I haven't seen it yet. I'm gonna have to look out for you now.
It was hilarious. I was like, they left it in. Like it was another scene that had me like really doing stuff with that one. I was like, they left it in. Let's go. But yeah, man, just getting my hands with as much as possible and enjoying this. You know what I mean? Just enjoying life outside of the sport. I'm actually just getting back to playing, but I don't see me going back professionally anytime soon.
So we know that you played some ball, but what other sports did you play growing up in Philadelphia?
I started off with baseball when I was 8. That didn't last long, but it was kind of like my introduction. Okay, all right, let's see what this is about. And then I played football from the time I was about not long at all. I think I played football in middle school. So what is that, like 12, 11 to like 13, 14?
Yeah.
And I hated it, to be honest with you. It wasn't. I'm very big on people play like their personality within their sport, and then you got to find a sport that fits your personality. And that's not me. Like that's just not like I'm confrontational with the things I have to be confrontational with, but it's not the first thing I think of. And I was a DN, so all day, every day is just go at, go and hit somebody. And I was just like, but I didn't start playing basketball until I was like 15. And when I started playing, I just fell in love with it. Like, I don't know what it was. I'm happy it happened, but like I sucked, but I knew like I love playing this. And if I play enough, and if I study enough, I will get good at it. And it just kept going and kept going.
Yeah. So, you said you don't really know what started, but what were the influences as a young athlete that made you turn to basketball? Was it the height thing? I mean, obviously, you're not a small guy. So there was probably plenty of people saying, hey, listen, there's this orange ball. You could probably put it in the hoop pretty easily. Let's probably go do this. Or was it somebody you were looking up to?
I think it was a little bit of both. I think in part it was, being from Philly, you know what basketball is in Philadelphia. Like I said, Kobe from there. So you see murals of Dr. J and AI all over the city. And I'm from South Philly, so like I grew up like 15 minutes from the arenas. So like I remember pretty much when your brain starts logging stuff, when your memories start to like form, a lot of them were around that time of Al Iverson that first came in the league, and he was starting to like really heat things up. And the Sixers that went to the finals, I think when I was like 7. And around that same time, like, you know, state property and everything. So South Philly was just it. Like, you know what I mean? Like South, like Beanie Freeway and all of them. Like South Philly was just on fire in a good way in the early 2000s. So I think it was, for me, I was more drawn to the story of basketball, not so much the sport. I was always very interested in the story and how that played out and the things that it influenced, things that it touched. I remember telling somebody, the reason I wanted to go to a big college was I saw the documentary, the 30 for 30 on the Fab Five. And I was like, that. Like, you know what I mean? Like that. Like, I really like that. Like, if I got to play at that level to do that, then let's do it. And
yeah, they were pretty influential. I remember that.
exactly. So for me, it was the story. You know what I mean? It was always the story, if anything.
That's what's up. Now you mentioned, you know, some of the great players in Philly. You mentioned Kobe. You and Kobe went to the same high school, right? And you know, you guys were in that same area. Did you ever have any encounters with him? What was it like being in that high school where somebody so legendary was, you know, also walking those halls at one point?
It was kind of surreal. It was funny. So I didn't start going to Little Marion until my junior year. We had, you know, parents' jobs went well. We got a chance to move out to the suburbs, and it's funny. We lived on the edge. So on one side of the street, you'll be going to Overbrook, which is Will Chamberlain's high school. On the other side, you're going to Little Marion, which is Kobe's high school. And 2010, we moved out there. This is 1 year after I started taking ball serious, and it was kind of like this is crazy. You know what I mean? You know, obviously we chose the house, but it wasn't like, oh, we're going here because of Lower Marion. It was just, this is the house that can be afforded. This is what we can do right now. Let's make it happen. And I got there, and they were actually tearing down the building he was in. So the gym that he practiced in is still there. A lot of the hallways are there now, but the gym that they played in and the bulk of that building was getting demolished. And I just remember thinking, pay attention. And then they opened up the new one with the Kobe Bryant Gymnasium in it. And the day that he came there to dedicate it, a lot of the team had met him, and I don't know why, but I was off. I think I was off my mother. I was doing something different to the side. And because I was doing that, I didn't get a chance to see him. I've always been like one step away from meeting him or seeing him, unfortunately. But being in that building, his presence is, you feel it. They have a shrine, like the shoes and all the stuff in it. They have one of the students made a mosaic of him. Especially now with him passing, there's more things. But I was always very aware of his presence. I got a chance to talk to some teachers of his. Our coach is the same person. You know what I mean? So I got a chance to figure out who he was. But like I said, I was much more interested in the story. Who is this dude as a man? As I know he is the basketball player. Anybody can get on YouTube and see who he is, the basketball player. I was more interested. Like, I feel like I'm here to learn who he was as a person. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's pretty cool. And, you know, I mean, it's pretty crazy that, you know, the street you end up on, it's either one legend or the next. And then being in that area, you have the Sixers and you have all these other teams. And, you know, we'll get to you playing for your hometown team, but let's talk a little bit about high school ball. When was it that you started to make that transition where the letters start coming in, you start getting offers, and recruiting starts to pick up a little bit? I obviously know your story from doing research on you, but, you know, when do these things really start to kind of take off?
Late. Yes, you're not. So for me, obviously I was tall. I hit a growth spurt. So that was like you said, that was part of the reason why I was like, this isn't, it was easier for me to catch up because it's like I have the height thing, thank God. But going into my senior year, as good as my junior year went, I didn't play AAU. Or let me say this, I didn't take AAU serious. I hated it for real, because it wasn't team basketball. It was so obvious. There's like, everybody here is just trying to get their shit off, and it's fine, but as a forward, you know what I mean, it doesn't really favor you. And I didn't have the wits about me to understand, like, control what you can control. Go get as many rebounds as you can. Go get your putbacks. I mean, take your shots when you have to as soon as you get the ball. But I was expecting the team game, and it's like, nah, that's not how it is out here, bro. So because I didn't really play AAU, and that's where a lot of coaches were gravitating, I didn't really get seen a whole lot. Going into my senior year, all I had was a D2 offer from Holy Family. And that had pretty much held up not the entire year, but damn near the entire year. In the state tournament, in the district tournament, we started to really heat up. And actually, the district championship was at Villanova. And we were practicing there like a week later, and one of the coaches had approached me and told me, like, listen, Coach Wright, it was actually Larry Brown, BSU now. You look up my name and Larry Brown, the article pops up where Larry Brown was like the one who like discovered me. Because Coach Wright wasn't sold. This is a true story. Coach Wright wasn't sold, but Larry Brown was like, I like that kid. And I don't know how I feel about Larry Brown being my co-signer, but it worked. But yeah, he was the one who kind of pointed Coach Wright, like, pay attention to that one. And a coach had approached me from Villanova saying they were interested, but still nothing really came from it. And I think at the end of the year it was like Holy Family, Holy Cross up in Worcester, Massachusetts, Hartford in Connecticut, and like Temple had Delaware and Temple had given me like a preferred walk-on spot. And I was heated. I was like, I know I can play at a higher level. I know I can get more than what I'm being told I'm worth, but it's going to take patience. So I went up to Worcester Academy for a year, which is a prep school within that New England prep league where a lot of guys from like Kansas and Syracuse have come from, because that area pumps out kids to like high major schools. And I was like, all right, I'm going to go up there. I'm going to play against them. I'm going to show that I can play with them. And then I'll make my decision in a year. And it wasn't until that prep year that things started to open up. And my last four, it came down to Villanova, Seton Hall, Utah, and South Carolina. Those are my last four schools.
Yeah. Now, how beneficial was it for you to take that prep year, not just to evolve as a ball player, but to evolve as a man growing up? And, especially since you were kind of a late bloomer in the game, right? How beneficial was that prep year?
It was huge. It was huge. Like you said, as a man, I got to figure myself out. My first time away from school. From home. And I think it's very beneficial because being in boarding school, you get a taste of what college is going to be like. And just being in that environment has showed me what it's like to live with your teammates and how the dynamic of your relationship changes when I got to see you at practice. I got to see you in class. I got to see you at the dining hall. Like, it's like the same way that, like, you messing with a chick and it's just y'all are cool and it's nice, and then y'all start living together and it's like, all right, it's different. It's just like that was how it felt. All right, we have to understand each other on a deeper level now because we are going to see each other. But it was more so those type of things that were different. The basketball was pretty on brand, but like you said, it was more so like my character and who I was as a young man starting to kind of take shape and develop and figure that out and figure out who I was away from my parents' watch and things like that. But that year was turbulent, but it was just things were just clicking. You know what I mean? I learned so much about myself and my environment, in that year.
So academically, you mentioned that it's kind of your first time away from home. It's where you really start to realize what it's like being on your own for the first time. And now, even though you have teammates that are living with you, there's a coach that's kind of, overlooking, looking over your shoulder. It's still about you making it to class and doing your homework. What was it like that first year taking ownership of academics as well as athletics when you were taking that prep year?
For me, thank God it wasn't a ton of pressure because I had pretty much did everything I had to do in high school or towards the end. Sometimes guys will go up there I think I had to take the SAT again to get like the best score I could get. So it was like I was cleared for eligibility. But it was accountability is the word that comes to mind. Like you said, it kind of showed like, oh, this getting the class thing on your own. It's not like, oh, the school drops you off, you're in the building. Like, no, I have to walk over to my class, or I have to go over across campus to my class. And I could miss it, but there'll be consequences for it. We used to wake up early in the mornings, and I think that was another huge thing that kind of tied in. So I knew there is no more. There's no more of this. Oh, I'm just gonna wake up and finish this last little bit of the paper before I go to this class in the morning. It was no. You got to get everything done the night before. You have to have that discipline and lock in on the work before, because I knew at 6 a.m. I'm going to the gym to shoot before school even starts, and then when school starts, I'm on the roll. I think the relationship between being able to leave a class and take a nap. As I got introduced to that, I had kind of abused it at first, and I realized, like I said, accountability is huge. I remember a few days waking up with like my phone's blowing up, like, where the hell are you? Or, yo, the class about to start. Like, please tell me you got something that I can tell the teacher to hold her off, and before she tell coach. But our coach, thank God, Jamie Sullivan, was just he understood young men. He understood the things that young men are naturally going to do because they're young men. And he was just like, all right, you know what? It's okay. You know what I mean? It's fine as long as y'all are learning. And it didn't take long to adjust. And some of the other kids had been within that, I don't want to say system, but I'm saying the system of boarding school since the beginning of high school. So they were used to it. For me, it was a bit of a shell shock because I'm coming from like one of the most liberal public schools in the Philadelphia area to, you know, a very conservative private school, boarding school in, you know, in rural Massachusetts. So it was an adjustment, but, you know, I mean, it was what it was.
Yeah. So then it becomes time to move on to the next level. And you already mentioned the 4 schools that were on, top of mind. What was it about Nova that made you want to essentially go back home?
It was funny. That was the one thing I didn't want to do. The plan was to go up there. Seriously, I wanted to play. I wanted to play in the Pac-12 because I knew my ability to be physical would be something that's rare in a league that is so up and down. You know what I mean? If you look at a lot of the Pac-12 teams, they're running gun teams. Oregon, Arizona, ASU, they're not, you know what I mean? It's the West Coast. It's run and gun. And then you have the grind of the East Coast. And I knew there aren't some people out there who's going to want to do that with me in that conference. You know what I mean? But I go out to Utah and I liked it, but just something didn't feel right. I'm very big on feelings. So something didn't feel right in Utah. I go over to South Carolina. And I wasn't interested in Frank Martin was the new coach over there, and he was only 1 year in. So it was still, okay, now he was at a point where I know who I want to keep, I know I want to get rid of. He still had to clear house to a degree. And I just I didn't want to be a part of that rebuilding that was going on. I felt like that was just, it was a lot. When I went to Nova, I sat down with Coach Wright. And this is our first time. Like, I'd seen him obviously because of basketball in Philly, but this is our first time sitting down and actually talking to each other and getting to know one another. And we talked about everything but basketball. And for me, I had left that not 100% knowing, but just a feeling like this feels right. I like the idea of being home. The Big East was in their reconstruction period where those 7 Catholic schools had left, and Syracuse went to the ACC. Notre Dame went to, I think they're like in the Big 12 or Big 10 or something. Cincinnati, like all those schools had kind of dropped off, and the core group of Georgetown, Seton Hall, Villanova, Providence, et cetera, had picked up the other schools and made a 10-team conference. So I'd like that. And I noticed that Nova, they had just lost a forward. So I was like, all right, this is it. Between Coach Wright understanding life outside of basketball and what I thought was a necessity for my position, Villanova just seemed like the best fit.
So when you get to campus, and like I said, luckily for you, you had taken that prep year. What was the transition going from that prep year to essentially going back home and being around old friends, new friends with new teammates? Your family is there. Does all of those things make it harder for you to focus because you're in a familiar area?
Yes, undoubtedly. It was just it's a level of comfort that I now know I'm not going to say wasn't good, but you have to be a very disciplined young person to have that
Mm-hmm.
level and not immediately run towards. Like, for example, I just moved out to LA. I got out here 3 months ago at this point. There's a level of comfort out here that I do not have, and I just can't go and get immediately. So it ignites something in you that makes you kind of, you know what I mean? It kind of makes you churn and move and question and things like that. And all those things ultimately lead to growth, to call it what it is. You might end up just doubling down on some things you already knew. You might end up understanding some new things. Like, I'm learning quickly out here how many ways it is to be involved in what I thought I wanted to be involved in. I came out here like, oh, make film. It's like, all right, bro, that means a million things out here. It's the same thing with college athletics. Like, you get to it and you have this idea of what college is going to be. And then you get there and you realize how many things really go into it. And like I said, when you have that safety net of a comforting home right there, it's difficult. It's difficult. But for me, it wasn't terrible because I wasn't the most social person. Like, I'm not. My name is what it is in Philly because of sports and because of the few people who have known me and the things that I've shown up, not because I was the neighborhood guy. You know what I mean? I think it's always harder for those guys when everybody knows you everywhere and every block you go to, any party you show up to, or you know what I mean? Like, people immediately know you and want to walk up to you and talk to you and you know them back. Like, I think those guys struggle a bit more. I was in no way like the king of Philly. You know what I mean? When I came back, it was just like, oh, that's Darryl. He plays ball. You know what I mean? And I think if anything, that growing up, I wanted that, but I think that saved me, because if I would have came back, and that would have been the case, it would have been, yeah, it would have
Yeah. Yeah. So life at Villanova, what's it like then? You know, with being in that comfortable spot, what's it like when you're on campus? You got to go to class and you're playing ball in your hometown. What's it like for you on campus as now, you know, a Nova basketball player?
been. That's a great question. It was, so we definitely got to Nova at a time where things were going like this. Like, you say Villanova
Mm-hmm.
now, and it has a different weight than it did in 2013. In 2012, Coach Wright was about to get fired. No, not about to get fired,
Mm-hmm.
but whispers, because they had such a bad season. The school had the most confidence in them, but if you ask Philly sports fans, the most rational people on earth, it was all but done. So there was a stress about getting to a certain point. There was a openness and a optimism towards, well, hold on, this isn't the old Big East. This is a new day. Let's see what that's about. And we had came in at a time where just the year before, in 2012, he was about to get fired. At the end of the 2013 season, that spring, they went to the tournament and lost to North Carolina in the second round.
Mm-hmm.
We had got there at a time where the momentum was kind of moving. And I saw over the years, as being a Villanova basketball player went from, oh, okay, like you're in the social, standing on campus, you're at damn near the top, to by the end of it, it was almost like we almost aren't a part of this thing. Like, we're something different. You know what I mean? Like, we're almost seen as something kind of otherworldly on campus. But when I first got there, it was nice. It was just, for me, it was a shell shock. Like I said, I came from Lower Marion. It's funny, many people don't know this, but Lower Marion and Villanova are 10 minutes down the road from each other and could not be different in the worlds that they're in. I went to school with predominantly Jewish kids whose parents were obviously very, and I don't say this in a political sense, I mean it's like in the way they think, very free-thinking, liberal kind of parents, very artsy. I remember like Lower Marion used to have like an art gallery, like hosted, like all the students we would put our work on display at the end of the year, in the atrium, and like that was that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get to Villanova, and now you are dealing with legacy parents, legacy students, private schooling probably from pre-K up until that point. A lot of things were based in financial backgrounds. So a lot of the business school was the biggest part of Villanova as far as the schooling goes. The communication school, the one I was in, was probably one of the smaller ones. And it was this weird kind of power dynamic of on one hand, I'm a basketball player and I see what that affords me. But on the other hand, my major is within the arts, which is not taken that serious or wasn't taken that serious, shall I say, at that time. And it really created like a weird, it gave me a lot of perspective. It allowed me to see, oh, okay. You know what I mean? There's a lot of space between the quote unquote top and bottom, the left and right out here. But I think that just made me a more complete college student as opposed to college athlete. You know what I mean? I was all in. That shit was a second job. But
Yeah.
student in communication school at Villanova really gave you a real life view of, oh, okay, I see how nice the business school is and I see what we're dealing with. But like I said, it was humbling and it was nice and it all kind of added to the experience.
Did you declare a major of communications as soon as you came in, or did you kind of figure that out after you got there?
No. For me, it was, so you can't declare a major as soon as you get in, but they ask you what you want to do for what class they want to start. And I've always known, the beauty of playing basketball so late was I always knew who I was outside of it. I always knew what I was outside of the game. I knew good and well, film. I want to be involved with film and media in some way or another. I just didn't know how. What happened is when I first got there, they saw my writing. They was like, you should be a writing major. And I was just like, I'm too visual for that. It can't all be on paper. That's not how my brain works. I need to, if anything, I can get the stuff on paper because of what I can visualize and what I can hear. So I specialized in screenwriting to kind of marry the two. Took journalism, broadcast journalism. Like I said, I'm big on perspective. So for me, it was when I got to communication school in my junior year, and it's like, all right, now your schedule is just the stuff that you want to take that benefits your major. I made sure I took everything I could. So I was like, whatever position I'm thrown in, whether it's documentary style or, like I said, broadcast journalism or public speaking, whatever realm y'all throw me in communications, I at least have a baseline understanding. And then it just became about chiseling that down to something more direct, like directing.
That's pretty cool. I mean, you're basically the opposite of me. I mean, I came in business and was doing business things and didn't like it and changed my major to communications and English, to be completely honest. So I had an English degree in writing. Communications was my minor because I couldn't see it like you. I could write it down and I can, but now I've done more on camera things and more things with video as my career has kind of gone on. So now I can understand what you're saying about being able to see it and not just writing it down. So I get it completely.
Thank God. All right, thank God. Because most times people can't, I don't really get the difference. Like your screenwriting, I'm like, it's different when you're writing for something that is, that thing is being taken and made visual. Like the thing that I'm writing is posted a visual feel, as opposed to, like you said, a writing major. Like I've seen thesis papers and I'm like, you know what I mean? Like it's not like they're writing. This is not my wheelhouse. Even down to the technical side of it, of what y'all understand from this is what it takes for this to be presentable at a certain degree, as opposed to screenwriting. You know what I mean? Like, did you get what I was saying? All right, cool. We're good then.
Like, you can interpret that a lot differently.
Exactly. But you get it.
Yeah. So let's talk some basketball now. As your career's going, what's it like? What's the career like? Are you lighting up scoreboards, double doubles? What's it like for you on the court?
Oh man. The first word is humbling. So when I committed to Villanova, it was on. Like somebody had put out an article, hometown hero. Like I said, this wasn't me. It was just they knew me because of Lower Marion, and basketball. Hometown hero, X, Y, and Z returns Nova is this big write-up about the people to look out for in the beginning of the year, and you know what I mean?
So they put a target on your back is what they did.
Yeah. Worcester Academy has this, and I was killed. Like up there, I was like on. So I was just, woo! It was another level. Seriously, like I was, like my high school coach didn't. That was the time when like big men weren't shooting threes, and like up there, I was shooting threes and just doing all types of fades. I was in my bag. So I get to Villanova, and people are like basing off of that. They're like, this guy, and they had just lost somebody who was 6'8". And it played kind of like me, just not as mobile. So the article goes to show you how much the media knows. the article sees that and immediately says, okay, this guy is going to get right in that position, and he's already as good as the last guy was as a senior before he even comes as a freshman, so he's going to be the next guy. Freshman year, I did not sniff the floor. I did. I didn't play. It was like I said, it was humbling. It was very I remember being like it was just lesson in number one. Beware of the hype, because I had fed into it too, and it was like, this is why would I take these people's opinion versus the coaches? You know what I mean? Like, it's just, when I look back on it, it's kind of like I was setting myself up for an L. So freshman year was just a bunch of frustration and grinding behind the scenes. Sophomore year, I started to play for real. And the first half of the year, I'm playing, I'm contributing, and I'm helping us win. And it felt great. We get the conference play, and it was almost like it was a timer on me. Like, as soon as we got the conference play, Coach Wright cuts the rotation, and he goes with the guys he trusts, because the conference is that is like the creme de la. So at the end of the year, I would call it what it is. I was ready to transfer. I didn't tell him. Like, we had our end of the year meetings, and he wanted to meet with 4 guys, 2 juniors that were thinking about leaving as far as like the NBA or transferring, and 2 seniors and Javon Pinkston and Darryl Reynolds who were leaving. He wanted to talk to them about NBA workouts and the next step. So I didn't tell him, but at the end of those meetings, he then calls me in, and apparently somebody had told him like I was looking to transfer, which was crazy because I didn't tell anybody. I think they just kind of sensed it. Like, you might want to make sure. I think it was more of a, if X leaves, and he leaves and X leaves, then we have a problem. So you need to make sure that he's good. But for some reason, the time I made it to his office, it was understood that I was ready to leave. Pretty much just asked for some time to kind of figure out what I'm gonna do and figure out what I want to do. And by the end of it, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna just stay. I'm gonna stick it out. It's no need to do that and jump ship just yet. This is the time where a lot of the work starts to pay off. And junior year, it was hit the ground running. Junior year was from start to finish. Started some games. I think like a third of that season I started, between just random lineups to injuries to actually getting playing time. Like, junior year was like, all right, I'm all in. Like, I'm all in. And that was one thing people really started to take notice. Like, oh, this guy isn't just a guy. You know what I mean? He can actually play and all that. And then junior year was topped off by us winning the national championship. And then senior year was it was a hustle. It was a grind, because at that point we're coming back. Like, it's like, I'm trying to think of an analogy that's appropriate on here. But I remember an article. I remember understanding how difficult that year about to be when I saw a Philadelphia article, and it's me and Josh on the front, and we're pointing to each other. We're like joking, and we were like joking for a photo shoot. And it says, "The Hangover, ? Has Villanova's past spoiled their seniors?" And it was just like, God, like, it's just, like I said, another lesson in the media, understanding the gray area they stay in, they follow the story. You know what I mean? They don't necessarily follow the person, the man in the arena, as people will say. And because of that, and obviously the fact that we won, now everybody plays us. It's their championship. This is their Super Bowl. There were teams that were like lose, like BSU not literally had losing records that beat us within that year, and you would have thought it was like that celebration the Timberwolves had when they won the first round of the playoffs. And you just thought they were like the ridiculous. Like, it was like that, and you had to live with that. You had to understand that there were a lot of games. Plus, there was a new level of excellence expected from us. So there's a lot of games we would win and then get in the back in that back room, and it felt like a loss because we didn't live up to certain principles. So senior year was like a grind. But all in all, like I said, my time at Nova, it was about perspective. I went from being the freshman who didn't sniff the floor to being the senior that was playing too much with an injury. And what happened was, after I got hurt, I actually went on staff. While I was doing the media stuff in the first year, I went on staff as a coach. And it made me that much better of a coach, because I could talk to the kid who thought they was going to come in and be X, Y, and Z. And then I could talk to the seniors who were actually people I played with, which was weird, about carrying a load that feels too heavy. You know what I mean? So Nova Nova was definitely informative.
Yeah.
Definitely informative.
So as your career kind of comes to an end at Nova, what are your thoughts about the next step, right? Because you're you know who you are as a 14-year-old because you knew what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
And then basketball stardom takes off. National champion, you're on the cover of things, like all this type of hype. You're kind of at an impasse of, do I go film right now or do I go the basketball route? Did you have that internal conversation or did you talk to somebody about, I'm going to go to the draft or I'm going to go to the NBA? Like, what was that conversation like?
No, it actually wasn't. I'm not. There was no thought in film. It was just, for me, it was a very. Film was. I talked to Coach Wright about this before I left campus. Film was going to be what I did in the summers. So when I came home in the summer, let's say I'm an overseas guy through and through. In my mind, it's NBA, but let's say I'm an overseas guy through and through. Come home in the summers, you do your internships. I was one that, pretty like, if you look at Jalen Rose's career, Jalen Rose, towards the end of him playing, a lot of guys do it now, but he was like one of the first ones to really like do it right and do it first. But towards the end of him playing, you started seeing him in media stuff. You started seeing him in media roles. Like even the Fab Five documentary, you watch how much they focused on him and his storytelling ability. And then as he rounded out his playing, it was just, okay, now we seamlessly push you into that. Like you see what's happening with CJ McCullough and guys like that now. JJ Redick did it as he was wrapping up. You know what I mean? It's just it's kind of a progression now. People are more aware that sports is a transition. It was on my off days in Poland, I would go to a cafe and write. When I had in between time, I would do things. I always watch movies like left and right, just watching different movies to kind of figure out which styles and cameras and all types of stuff I like. And it was study it, but I was all in with basketball. Immediately jumped into NBA workouts. Like I said, it's crazy. I actually got the call about the Sixers Summer League thing. I was in Dubai. I was helping out a friend with the basketball camp they were doing out there. They were trying to get basketball to the Middle East. And he was the guy they chose to like kind of start that. So I'm helping with a camp out there, and my agent calls me. He's like, the Sixers got a spot, but you got to be here by Thursday. And it's Tuesday night in Dubai. It's crazy. So serious. Like, honest to God, I fly to Philly the next morning, go to Nova, work out. And then the next morning, I drove myself to the Sixers facility and joined the Summer League team after a tryout. So it was just like, basketball was, and when it was happening very fast, as it always had for me, because I started so late, but it was also like, no, this is it. Like, this is it. Until 35, 40, when I retire, this is it, because I've dedicated so much time and so much energy to this thing. There is no way I can't see this through. And it wasn't until the injury, and even during the injury, it was still like bro, you know you're not about to go back to being, you know what I mean, like what you were. Like, not saying you can't do X, Y, and Z, but you ain't about to get back to that same kid. It's not. It just can't happen.
Yeah. So when, you get injured and, a lot of people have, myself included, when I'm like, okay, I'm done being an athlete. What's next, right? Like, especially because as an athlete, no matter what level, that competitive fire burns so hot all the time. You're watching sports, you're like, I can do that. Like, I'm gonna get in the gym and I'm gonna be back. What's the toll on the mentals, and where are you at between the ears when you're looking at, your knee all ripped up, and then you're like, well, I got to figure something out. So what's that conversation that you're having with yourself about what the next step is?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think for me, a huge first step, unfortunately, was denial. I didn't really digest what was happening. And it was because I've never hurt my knee. I never had a surgery. I was laughing. The day I got hurt, I BS you not, there's a video of me getting wheeled into the hospital, and I have my fingers together like this, and I'm like, da, 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 da. Like, through the hospital. I didn't know how serious the shit was. And as I started to kind of unravel, and like it started to become clear, like, oh, this isn't just I'm gonna be back in 7-8 months. Like, I was dunking 6 months out against doctor's orders. It was just all bad. as that reality started to set in more and more, I started to understand. I started to understand the mortality of basketball, along with my own mortality. Like, you have one life, you know what I mean? Like, figure out what you're gonna do and figure out what you truly love and want to do. But anyway, with the injury, the first thing that I did out the gates was get right back to work on the show. When I came back from overseas before my injury, I talked to a professor of mine, Hezekiah Lewis. He was another big part of getting me to Nova, about doing like a talk show. And I did this talk show called Stay Tuned with D-Ray, where I sat down with my former teammates and coaches. And, you know, we had this kind of like David Letterman, Jimmy Kimmel style banter for like a late night talk show. And I was like, this is what I want to do. And I had told him that when I first got back. So then when I got hurt, it was just like, all right, let's just go focus on the talk show. Like, I can't worry about the injury right now. I got to control what I control. And that's the talk show. And then that turned into other opportunities. And what it ultimately ended up happening was I understood that I have this entire person outside of sports and my sports identity that I can tap into and I can all out feed into. And what the theme over the past couple of years has been, okay, where's my balance? Because like you said, that competitive fire never stopped. It's funny, I'm back to playing ball now, semi-competitively, like pickup and stuff like that. And it's like, as soon as I like step between the line, like something happens, like almost like me, myself, and seriously, like I tap into something else. And I like that. I'm aware of that part of myself. I like that. I cultivate that part of myself, you know what I mean? But for me, it's been about marrying the two. After having basketball, felt like it was just completely taken. Because what I did was, like I said, I shut it out and was like, all right, I'm all out on the media. And it's like, that's not, you know what I mean? I was somebody within basketball, and that did help me figure out a lot of myself. Like I said, as a young person, kind of figuring yourself out. Any young athlete will tell you, you know what I mean? Like, man, or I know I said young men a lot for this interview, but like young men or young women, you figure out who your identity is through the game. If you're intuitive enough, you start to figure out, oh, I did this in the game because that's how I would do this in real life. You know what I mean? And once you start to figure things out, it helps you kind of roadmap who you are on and off the court. So for me, it's my biggest message has been about, and to myself and to others, has been about marrying the two. You know what I mean? You can be somebody outside of this game. You can have a passion or identity outside of this game, but don't forget the lessons and the things you've learned in them, and try to figure out how to combine the two. And obviously, if you have somebody that gets to the end of their career and they walk away on their own terms, it's a bit easier for them to do that. But for me, because it was such an abrupt stop, it was, I got to be honest with you, bro. Over the past couple of years, I've had several oh shit moments of like, wait a minute, I've done this. Like I did that. I was there for that. Like, because at first, I BS you not, when I looked at before some of the pictures of me at Nova, like I was like, it almost felt like another person. It almost didn't feel. Yeah. It was weird. I don't know if my brain did it to protect me, but it was almost like that didn't happen. You know what I mean? Almost like it was a dream. But it's like, no, it did. I was very much present when it was. How do I combine the knowledge I have now with that knowledge?
Yeah. So you kind of stole my last question. Last question is, when you talk to, the youth or your coaching, or even if you could go back in time and talk to 14, 15-year-old D-Ray, what's the advice that you give to that next generation, or even to yourself as a younger version of you, from what you've learned throughout your career?
Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. I think the quicker you make mistakes, the quicker you learn. And obviously, there's some things you just don't, you don't do. You know what I mean? Like that's just duh. You know what I mean? Like you don't go and punch a ref. Like that's not a mistake. Yeah. You don't. But I think I wasted a lot of time within the game and outside of it, and thinking about it and unpacking it, or what I could have done better, or things like that. And I think what this game has taught me is like things are going to happen. You're going to make mistakes. And I'm not saying the quicker you make them, the better, but as you make them, you learn, and you have to learn. You have to grow. You have to make them. You have to go for it. But I think I spent so much time trying to be perfect that I avoided certain mistakes that cost me in another way down the line. You know what I mean? So, yeah, don't be afraid to make mistakes.
That's what's up. Well, listen, man, I appreciate this. This was great. Like I said, for every interview, I do my research, but hearing all of it firsthand, along with the lessons learned and the experience of it, is always way better. And, this completely surpasses anything I can find on a D-Ray Wikipedia page or old stat or watch an old film or anything else. So I really appreciate it. I'm gonna let you enjoy the rest of the sunny day. I can see the sun coming through there in LA, and I'm gonna let you go. You got anything before we end today?
Nah, man. Like I said, thank you for having me on. This has been therapeutic in a way. You know what I mean? So thank you for having me on. But like I said, to any young athletes, just don't be afraid to. Two things. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, but make sure you see things through too. I think the point that I was trying to get at with telling people I was about to transfer from Villanova was like, that's not always the option. That's not always the choice. The thing to do nowadays seems to be if A isn't working, immediately try B. You know what I mean? Immediately. Like, you got to just do something, as opposed to, well, maybe A isn't working because A isn't supposed to work right now. You know what I mean? Like, Like, just be easy, be patient. And you see the transfer portal number jumping every year in every sport across both genders. You know what I mean? People are just with this. I'm out. And I think, we're already at a place where we're like, accountability is a word that's becoming less and less valuable. But when you see things through and you stick them through, even if it doesn't turn out exactly how you wanted it to, like my career at Nova, you learn so much, it sets you up for X, Y, and Z. I don't spend those last 2 years at Nova. I'm not a national champion, which means me and you probably aren't talking because nobody really cares about the top guy at the second place team. For real. I don't work through the amount of things that I work through. I don't make the relationships and the connections that I made. And then ultimately, let's say in some butterfly effect, alternate universe, I end up in this same situation with this knee, without that knowledge, without those lessons, without that discipline, without the things that I learned in those 2 years at Nova that I was ready to transfer away from. I could be somewhere completely different right now. You know what I mean? Especially after I'm starting to understand what a career-ending injury really does to you as far as like the mental toll it takes. And without that time, I don't think I'd be good for this one. So don't be afraid to make mistakes, and then don't be afraid for one of those mistakes to be, I stuck something through, because then you'll know when to walk away from something later.
Awesome. Well, I'm gonna let you go now. That's it. That's you took us to church in the end of it. I appreciate that. That's what's up. So thank you. I'm gonna stop this one. There's no more words. I really appreciate it, man. This has been great. And if you haven't seen Hustle, go watch it and see if you can see D-Ray peeking over Adam Sandler's shoulder. How about that? That's how we end today.
Thank you, bro. Thank you.